Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we are here to talk about all the things going on in the Big Ten. We're going to talk about these Week 9 games, preview them, talk about the matchups, who we think are going to do well, who we think might struggle a little bit, what we think score predictions are going to be, things like that. So we're going to have a great time. I have my man Brandon here from the LEO Indiana podcast for Big Banter Sports. We were supposed to have Max from the SkiU podcast, but his internet went out right before we were supposed to hop on here. So that's why we're starting a little bit late. Sorry about that, but we are going to have a great time hanging out and talking through some of these games. Brandon, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Max, really sorry you couldn't join us. I stole your signs, so I was fully prepared to debate you and win, but unfortunately, live to see another day.
He just got so scared, he ran away.
I stole his signs because apparently that matters so much. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but
yes. We will get into the Michigan stuff. We're actually going to save that until the end of the show. So if you want to hear us talk about that, tune in until the end, or just go ahead and skip ahead if you're listening to the podcast now. Who cares? You can just do that if you want. But Brandon, you want to take a minute and tell people where they can find your podcast at?
Yeah, you can find us at LEO Podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We were also briefly on Threads. I think we have like a dozen followers on the previous rage of Threads. Wow. Our podcast, we don't do video because we're a bunch of old men. But you can find our podcast on basically everywhere the podcast platforms exist. Apple, Android, Spotify, SoundCloud, you name it, the LEO podcast exists. We do 2 shows, 1 preview, 1 post game. So for all you diehard Indiana fans, come check us out. Or if you just want to hear us people rant, like you want to feel better about yourself, like if you're down on your program, State, and you want to come feel better about yourself, you can come listen to us.
It's funny. I look at the power rankings I put on there where I compare everybody's on Twitter, and it's always Michigan State and Indiana there at the bottom. So you guys can find some community there together and enjoy each other's company. So
misery loves company.
Hey, but basketball season, right? That's starting up.
I guess.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's get into some of these games. We have Michigan State, Minnesota. We're going to talk about that one first because of Max, which I guess we'll still talk about that one first. Michigan State is at Minnesota. Minnesota is favored by 7 points. The over-under on this is 40.5. This is an interesting matchup. Minnesota coming off a big win versus Iowa. Michigan State coming off a pretty big loss to Michigan, 49-0. That was kind of just a product of, I think, Michigan being very angry about the news coming out. So that was a big deal. Brandon, what are some of your thoughts on this one?
My thought, like anytime a game PJ Fleck is in, I want to root for the other team. There is no bigger clown in all of college football, not just the Big Ten, than PJ Fleck. He can go row his boat literally anywhere else. But there isn't a more of an embarrassment of a program on and off the field than Michigan State. So I will be, if I have to choose, gun to head, I'm taking Minnesota -7. What I'm mostly doing is taking the under. Both of these offenses are pretty brutal. They have playmakers on the defensive end. Cal Haladay for Michigan State's really good. Minnesota has a strong front 7. Over and under 40 points seems like a lot, but when you're dealing with a Big Ten West team, it's not as much as you think. Yep. So I would lean Minnesota -7 here, but I feel better about the under. What about you?
Yeah, I think I would have to go with the under as well. Whenever you talk Big Ten West, I feel like that's kind of what you have to do and where you have to go first. But I really feel like it's going to be the defense here from Minnesota that wins them the game. I think Darius Taylor is a good back, and from everything I know, he's playing in this one. Athen, Kaliakmanis, I think he completed 7 balls to 1 wide receiver last week. Jackson kid, Daniel Jackson, he had like 10 targets, 7 catches, and then his running back had the other 3. I think. So obviously part of that is Iowa, a product of what Iowa wants to do on defense. So I do think he's going to bounce back and have a better game against Michigan State. They have some players entering the transfer portal right now. None from the secondary I've seen, but at least some from the defensive line are getting in there. So I think unfortunately for Michigan State, this is just one of those seasons where, guys are entering the portal. It's going to be less and less. And watching the games is really more about finding some of those younger players that can make a difference that way. So I think Nathan Carter could have a good game. It's going to be interesting to see if Caton Hauser has a good game because he's kind of faced some tough competition between Rutgers defense and Michigan, obviously last week trying to get into this. So that'll be really interesting. What were you saying?
So we're into week 8 or week 9 into the season. I've hit 3 parlays. 2 4-bangers and a 5-banger. One of them I had Rutgers money line in that Rutgers Michigan State game. I watched every single second of Rutgers Michigan State, and I'm a worse man for it. But the only way Michigan State's won that game is they had or not won that game but scored points is because they constantly had short fields. Rutgers muffed punts. Rutgers had on their side of the field turnovers. Michigan State can not score. Minnesota's defense is really, really good. But really, I'm not sure how either team moves the ball. Minnesota is currently averaging less than 140 yards passing the ball. They're running the ball for 175, which is pretty good, but Michigan State only allows 115. So again, the only way either team is going to be able to score is special teams or turnovers or short fields. Give me Minnesota doing both of those better.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think that Minnesota for sure threatens with the run game better than some other teams have. And I don't think Athan Kaliakmanis, at least this year, is that much of a threat. So I think Michigan State is going to flood the box and really try to make Minnesota throw more. But I still think it's going to be too much. I just don't have much confidence in Michigan State with how many players are losing in the transfer portal. If I had to give a score prediction on this one, I'd say 17, maybe 24-13, going with Minnesota. I think you'll hit the under, and I think most likely Michigan State will cover, but there's always the off chance Minnesota gets a late touchdown or something like that, and they hit the over there, or they cover there. So yeah. Any more thoughts on this one, Brandon?
No, I got it by slim margin. I got it 20-12. Minnesota.
20-12. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to your Hoosiers at Penn State this week. Yeah. Woohoo! I know you're going to pick the upset on this one, right?
I honestly, I can probably look to see what Indiana money line is plus 2,500. No. So I just got done previewing this game on the LEO podcast, and I'm just going to use my same exact line. Put your life savings, your house, everything that you own on Penn State minus 32. IU cannot move the ball. Yeah. They don't have any. They just fired their coordinator. Their new coordinator might be worse. They've had 3 guys play under center. They don't have a running back averaging over 5 yards a carry. They don't have a wide receiver averaging over 50 yards a game. They will not be able to move the ball against an average defense. They are playing the number 1 scoring defense in the entire country and the number 2 overall defense in the entire country. We just talked about we don't know how Minnesota and Minnesota and Michigan State is going to score. JR, I don't know if IU scores in this game. And if they do, it will be a fourth quarter garbage time touchdown. But nobody wants to hear about IU. Let's jump to the other side, right? This is a get right game. This is the game you want after a loss that Penn State had. Drew Aller was very disappointing. The run game had its spots, but it was mostly disappointing. I think they probably had a long week of practice, and they are going to take it out on IU. If you just look what they've done, other than last week, Penn State, if I believe, this might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were one of like 5 teams that was undefeated against the spread. I'm pretty sure before last week they were 6-0 against the spread
That
before
sounds right.
last week. I think they get right back on that. I actually think they win by 40. My prediction on the LEO podcast, and I'll stick it with here, I think it is 47-6.
47-6.
Indiana.
Yeah, I think Penn State's going to come out angry. I think that they're going to come out and try to just dominate as best they possibly can. And also, I mean, being at home too, those fans want something to hold on to. And even though a blowout game against Indiana is not going to be much to hold on to, it's going to at least make the fans feel a little bit better if Drew Aller comes out there and has one of those games where he's just passing the ball, high completion percentage, maybe not the most yards in the world, but he's efficient. And Nick Singleton and Katron Allen have one of those games where they are really able to take care of business running the football. I want to see that offensive line run the football a little bit better. They ran the football well in the first half against Ohio State. As somebody who roots for Ohio State, that concerned me a little bit. I was like, man, 20-yard run. I think there was a 12-yard run in there. So, Nick Singleton had a good game in the first half. And then I went back and looked at the stats in the second half. They had 6 rushes for 6 yards with their running backs in the second half. So, I mean, the running game just completely let them down in the second half. Maybe you could say that Mike Yurcich abandoned it too fast, possibly. But at the same time, they were also down in that game, and it's really hard to come back when you're only running the ball like that. But they have to get through third down conversions here. 1 for 16 last week against Ohio State. You have got to be better than that, especially against a team like IU. I agree with you. I think this is a get-right game for them. I would not be surprised if Penn State has another, 50, 60-point game, and this one just really takes it to IU. If we're being honest here, Tom Allen is just a dead man walking. I mean, he's going to be gone. I don't know why he's not gone yet. It is obvious that the sooner you fire your coach, the sooner you can try to get into figuring out what you're going to do, who you're going to hire and that kind of stuff. So it just doesn't make any sense to me that they kept him around. They already fired the offensive coordinator. The new offensive coordinator is already terrible. Those players deserve better. I do think that there are good players on the IU's offense. I think Taven Jackson is a good player. I think Jalen Lucas is a good player. I think Cam Camper is a pretty good player. But unfortunately, they don't have the coaching. They don't have the offensive line. They don't have the players around them that they need to really showcase their skills and do things. So, we'll see what happens. I'm thinking take the over as well. I could see it being some kind of 56-3 or something like that, where
Penn State will clear the over. Penn State will clear the over by themselves.
Yeah.
I feel confident about that.
Yeah. It's just about how much do they let Indiana have? Do they let them get a garbage time touchdown? Do they let them hang around in the first, half at all? I don't see another Northwestern performance from Penn State where they are tied 10-10 at halftime. I don't see it happening. So, any other thoughts on that one, Brandon?
Please, God, don't make me talk anymore about IU football.
All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, our next game that we're going to be looking at is Ohio State at Wisconsin. Some people are looking at this as kind of like a trap game for Ohio State. They had the big win against Penn State last week. Ohio State is favored by 14.5. The over-under on this is 45.5. I know that the Big Game Boomer has picked Ohio State to be upset twice already this year, and he's picked them again to be on upset alert. So I don't know if there's some kind of vendetta there, but hey, he sees something, I guess. But I don't know. I feel like if Ohio State comes in and they take care of business as they should, this Ohio State team is the better team to me. I think Braylon Allen is the best running back on the field. Even if Travion Henderson plays, I still like Braylon Allen better than that. But I don't think there's any place on the field I would take any position group or any player over an Ohio State player. Maybe if Tanner Mordecai was playing, take him over Kyle McCord, maybe, but he's not playing. So Braden Locke, yeah. Braden Locke, I don't think that he is the guy to, come in and light a spark as the backup and do anything for this team. At least not against Ohio State. He might do that in another game, but I think it was pretty telling last week that Wisconsin came out a little flat against Illinois, and that running game had to save them, and that defense had to save them in that one. So it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens. What are your thoughts on this one, Brandon?
So I was down on Wisconsin coming into the season. Not so funny joke at all. Mine was Tanner, just a guy. I didn't think he was. I didn't think he was very special at all. Yeah. He's out indefinitely. He has a broken hand. When you're a quarterback, you need two. Even if it isn't your throwing hand, you still need two hands. So I think it is going to be Braden Locke. Now there's some special places. Camp Randall on a Saturday night game is a special place. Magic can happen. But to channel my inner Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. This is gonna get ugly. Ohio State may cover the spread in the first half. Just because the only way Wisconsin is going to be able to win this game is on the ground, and Ohio State will not let you beat them the way that you want to beat them. Especially if you look at how they've lost in years past. They've lost by attacking that secondary. Now that secondary has been better this year, but I still think that's the way you get to. I mean, that's the way you're going to get to Ohio State. Wisconsin cannot do that. They don't have the quarterback, even though they have the system. My big thing going into the year was it was going to take a year, maybe two, for Fickell to get his guys and his philosophy. Phil Longo's, that's the offensive coordinator there, right?
Yeah.
Their system in place with their guys. There's going to be a transition. They're 5-2, so they're kind of doing what Wisconsin does. But I give this slim to no chance. Ohio State. Bigly.
Yeah. I forgot to give my score prediction there. I actually think Ohio State's offense is going to keep on with their struggles a little bit. I think I'm going to go with the patented Michigan score early in the season, the 31-10, where they were scoring basically that same score every game. But yeah, I think Ohio State. I think they go to Marvin Harrison Jr. again. I think Kyle McCord will probably struggle with some of the accuracy and stuff like that. I would not be surprised if this is at the end of the first quarter a 0-0 game. Ohio State just comes out slow. And Kyle McCord hasn't been helping that. They scored on the first drive last week against Penn State, but I think that's only happened twice this year. I think that happened against IU and against Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken, or against Indiana and Penn State. Sorry, Indiana and Penn State this year. So they're just not coming out very fast and not doing a great job of that. So I see it probably being like 31-10, something like that. If I were gonna take to cover, I would probably still pick Ohio State, but I don't think they'll score much more than 30 if they even get above 30. What's your score prediction, Brandon?
Yeah, no. So I got 37-10. Again, taking it over. Just because I think the time of possession is going to be so lopsided. I think the Ohio State is going to have the ball. It might be close because in the first quarter and a half. Just because of the magic of Camp Randall and the place will be hopping. But I just don't, it's gonna, the time of possession and the talent is just going to overflow as the game progresses. So I think it's just going to get a wider margin. So I got 37-10 Ohio State in the over.
Yeah, I think Luke Fickell will get one of these upsets one of these years. I just don't think it's this year. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. We have Maryland at Northwestern. Maryland, of course, has lost 2 in a row. It's kind of interesting how that happened, but they are favored in this one by 13.5. The over.
You know how it happened. Come on, you know how it happened.
What do you mean?
Mike Locksley. Talia deserves better.
That's true.
I think I'm probably the Turtleheads guys are crazy. But I'm probably the biggest Talia fan that isn't on the Turtleheads podcast. And Mike Locksley is he's so bad. He's a heck of a recruiter, but just as a coach, he gets coached around in circles quite a bit. And I think that's what happened last week. I actually do think Brett Bielema, I know the Illinois guys are kind of getting a little on edge with him. But he's a better coach than Mike Locksley. And I think that he won't have the coaching disadvantage in this game. And also I just don't see how Northwestern can keep up with Maryland in this game. I love their offense. They can score so quickly. So quick. I think they might, when you put in the average star ranking plus production, they gotta have the best offense in the Big Ten. They don't have the playmakers as some of the others, but given what they got, their offense is super fun to watch. Talia has won me a ton of money over his career when he isn't hurt. But as long as he's on the field, and there isn't a distinct coaching advantage for the other team, I consistently lean Maryland, and they have been nice to my bank account. And plus, I mean, there is no home field advantage in going to Evanston. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is even with this one being at home for Northwestern, really the only home field advantage is that Maryland's traveling. That's about it. Nothing against the fans or anything like that there. But I think Northwestern fans are pretty much ready for basketball, kind of like Michigan State and Indiana are this season as well. But I mean, props to Northwestern. They did more this year than people thought they would. I mean, we had people picking them 1, maybe 2 wins. They thought, the Howard win and maybe UTEP, but then lose all their games in the Big Ten. But props to them. They won those games and they beat Minnesota. I think Maryland is a more explosive team than Minnesota. I think Maryland has a better coach than Minnesota. Personally, even though I don't think he's the greatest coach, I still think he's probably better than PJ Fleck personally. But I think also just the star power of Tagovailoa. I mean, he is so good. He is so electric, and he can carry that offense. I think his receivers are good too, but I think he also makes those receivers look better than they are sometimes. Not to say they're bad. I think they're good playmakers. But then he also opens up the run game for Roman Hemby and Littleton and those different guys. So I think Maryland ends up this season probably 8-4. In order to do that, they have to win here. So like I said, the over-under on this one is 48.5. The favor is Maryland by 13.5. I forgot to write down my prediction for this one. If I was going with one, I'd probably do something along the lines of 31-14, 31-17, or something like that. What do you got, Brandon?
Yeah, 30 at 31-17. You're right there at the under. With the hook. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's 48 points. Again, I did go to IU, so I'm no mathematician, but I'm pretty sure 31-17 is 48. So you're right there.
It is right.
Right there at the under. Traditionally with Maryland, they're an over team. But again, I mean, Northwestern has put up some points. Like they said, you pointed out, they put up 37 against Minnesota. They were able to put up, never mind. Who am I kidding? Minnesota's the outlier. Outside of the Minnesota game, they've scored 7, 14, 13, 23 against Howard, and 9 against Nebraska.
They did have 38 against UTEP.
Yeah. I guess the pride of El Paso here,
right?
But yeah, I don't know. Maryland's defense is sneaky. I like the individual players more than the sum of their parts. But again, I don't see how Northwestern scores points here. So I got another blowout. I got Maryland big, but like I said, I am a huge Talia fan. So I'm gonna go 40-10 with the slight over in this game.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. Just to defend myself for a minute, not that I have to or anything, I do think that even though this Maryland team is a better defense than I think people give them credit for, those defenses that they faced, Rutgers, I think is one of the better defenses in the Big Ten. Duke, that's Mike Elko's specialty over there. Penn State, I mean, you just rattled off all their defensive stats. And I think Nebraska is a sneaky better defense than people give them credit for. I think they're up there as well. Now that could just be a product of the Big Ten West. I have no idea, but I think they're probably a better defense than people give them credit for. So 17 might be the high bar, but I'll take it. So, all right, you ready for Purdue, Nebraska?
Purdue, Nebraska. Well, I'm an IU guy, so you know who I'm taking here.
Take the corn.
You gotta take the corn here. My question to you, this is my analysis. What's going to get more viewers, Purdue, Nebraska, or Northwestern, Maryland?
Oh, I think Purdue, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Well, I think all those Purdue fans are going to be home. Purdue actually has a bigger fan base than I think I realized when I was rooting for the Big
They
Ten
do sell out
ago.
every home game for sure. And you know how rapid that Nebraska fan base is. Now, I do unfortunately have some Purdue friends. They're ready to run off their coach already.
Oh my gosh.
So
I feel like he's had an okay year so far.
So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna take Nebraska simply because Lincoln's a tough place. But I don't have a great feel for this. I honestly haven't watched a lot of Nebraska football, to be honest. So yeah. I'd be curious on your analysis here. Now Purdue gives up 400 yards a game.
Yeah,
that is a lot. That is not. That's defense optional here from a defensive coach. So even though Nebraska struggles to score, I'll say they score on a struggling offense or a struggling defense. Sorry.
Yeah, the problem with Purdue is Ryan Walters is running the defense like he has Devin Witherspoon on it. I mean, he's doing man coverage all the time. Like even against Ohio State, when I watched that game, it was like, dude, you're putting your corners on an island against Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka, and Cade like in your linebackers on Cade Stover. Like this is not going to end well for you. I think I do understand what he's doing. I think he's trying to establish that tough culture there. I think he knows the season is, they're not going to win anything this season, most likely. So I think he's probably setting up for the future more than he is this season in general. But at the same time, I also look at Nebraska and they don't have the pass catchers on the outside. And if Harburg starts, he's not a great thrower of the football. I mean, the dude has 5 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions on the season. That's not much better than Jeff Sims was. So Nebraska, they just can't throw the ball this year. Of course, Hudson Card has 7 touchdown passes and 5 interceptions, so he's not better. But he does have.
Is he one of the bigger disappointments, Hudson Card? I mean, I feel like a lot of people had him. Big Banter had him pretty high in the preseason rankings. I feel like he's been a massive disappointment.
The only thing I'll say about that is I didn't know this until I watched the Ohio State Purdue game because it was like the main talking point as they were blowing them out. But Purdue has just kept losing more and more and more offensive linemen. Like ever since that Illinois game, they blew Illinois out. I mean, they played a great game there. But ever since that Illinois game, they have just been losing offensive linemen like crazy. It's not quite as bad as Boston College was last year where they had defensive tackles playing guard. But it's still not a good situation there. So I think I am going to end up taking Nebraska's defense to win the game for them in this one. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think that over of 39.5 is way, way, way too high. I would not be.
Isn't that so funny to say though? Because it could be 28 and we could be like, maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Exactly. I could see this one being, and I'm going like high end here, like 17-13 or something like that. Nebraska wins. And it's more because of the defense just getting pressure on Card, and Purdue doesn't have the running backs that they need. I guess they do have Mockabee there, so but if Mockabee gets in fumbling trouble, that's going to be bad for them. So yeah, I think Nebraska probably wins this one. I'm going to take them to cover just very slightly, and just the under all day on this one. I don't think Purdue's offense is going to be what they've been this season, personally, to do what they need to do. You look at the last 2 games, 7 against Ohio State, 14 against Iowa. They've had offensive line issues. So yeah. Did you have a score prediction on this one?
I do. I got a crooked score on this one. I have 19-12. I think there's going to be weird things that go on. I wouldn't surprise me to see a safety. Wouldn't surprise me if Purdue has to go for 2. to make it a closer game. I think weird things tend to happen in these kind of games, right? Like these just absolutely ugly games. So give me a weird crooked score of 19-12 in Nebraska's favor.
Nice.
Weird night or weird afternoon in Lincoln.
Right. I was going to say this and I almost forgot. I'm glad you said weird score. I'm picking 13. And if you've watched Purdue this season, the kicking situation, you're like, John, that's so stupid. Why would you pick them to make 2 field goals? No, I'm not. I'm picking them to miss an extra point.
There we go.
The kicking situation is not. Did you hear what happened at the Ohio State Purdue game with the kicking?
I did, where the student made it. And yeah, that's not great.
Yeah, I think Ryan Walters was secretly holding kicker tryouts during that time. So. All right. We'll finally get to what probably a lot of people are itching to at least hear something about. We don't have any news to break on this. I'm sure if you've been following the Michigan sign stealing saga at all, you are probably caught up just as much, if not more, than we are. I've been having some fun with it on Twitter personally, so I am caught up on it enough to do that. But at the end of the day, this whole situation has so many different avenues, so many different things going on. We're just going to share our opinions here on this and maybe get into a little bit of like, will Michigan be better or worse this season? But Brandon, if I just asked you what your general opinion is on this Michigan situation right now, what would you say?
I'm going to answer your question with a question. Would you say that Michigan is a prestigious academic institution?
I would.
Would you say this is insanely stupid the way they got caught?
I would.
I mean, like, I'm more embarrassed for them with how they got caught. It was so obvious. Like, you always see like funny news headlines, like guy that steals wallet gets caught, doing what, like that's just so dumb how they got caught. It's more embarrassing like that.
Yep.
I honestly think it's kind of a nothing burger overall. Like, there's probably so much cheating and stuff that goes on that we don't even see. Like, how many times in the NFL does a team sign a guy off a practice squad, right? And it's blatantly just to know the playbook. Mm-hmm. I think this stuff happens more than you think, and we just don't see the underbelly of it. And I've heard a lot of people come forward and sort of say that. Right. So I don't personally think it's a big deal, but we were talking about it beforehand. I think this all comes down to politics. And I hate saying that because we're talking about kids. We're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds are going to get either taken down or nothing's going to happen because of politics. It's how well liked is Harbaugh? How well liked is their AD within the confines of the NCAA headquarters in Indianapolis, Indiana? I think that's what comes down to. I think you had a great point that I'll let you make in regards to that. But I think that ultimately is the direction this takes is I hate the Harbaughs, but that's probably more of a Tom Crean Baltimore Ravens thing.
I was going to say, you're also a Steelers fan and he's coaching Ravens. So
yeah. So that my bias towards Harbaughs is different.
Right.
But yeah, I ultimately don't see the huge issue with it.
Yeah.
And I hope nothing happens personally.
I think, and I didn't tell you this before we got on here. I'll make the other point in a minute, but I have a friend who her sister works in an athletic department over at an SEC school. And we were kind of talking about this a little bit. And I asked her, I said, how often does stuff like this go on? And she was like, oh, all the time. All the time. She was like, this kind of stuff happens a lot. And she said, honestly, people don't realize just how shady college football is. And she kind of used the example. She was like, did anybody realize how shady college basketball was until like they figured out the FBI and Sean Miller lost his job and all that? Like, nobody really knew. She said, if the NCAA is smart, they will not make a very big deal about this, because if Harbaugh wants to, and Harbaugh kind of will want to, I think if he does get punished, he can just start opening up the floodgates. Because she told me a story about how she didn't use any names, so I don't know for sure. And I don't have permission to say the school that she's at, so I'm not going to say that. But she was telling me about an analyst who graduated from their school, and they hired them on as an analyst. Well, around like week 7 or week 8, this analyst just like didn't show up anymore. Like he never really put anything like as desk. Analysts don't really have desks, but like their space they can work at.
Yeah.
And so like he never really had anything there. And then just one day, like he didn't show up, ghosted the team, ghosted everybody. Like they really didn't know what happened to him. Well, they found out that like they had some missing paperwork of like some playbooks and stuff like that. And they don't know what he did, but they're almost positive he's at probably another SEC school sharing some of their information and stuff like that. So obviously nothing concrete, but it was like super weird that like, oh, we hire on this analyst and by week 8 he's gone. This happened a couple years ago. So stuff like this happens more than I think people realize. But the thing that I do think will cause there to actually be some more penalties than I think people realize is that this is the new NCAA regime this year, and this is going to be like their very first time to like make a statement, put a punishment out there. These recruiting violations that Harbaugh did, these are nothing. I mean, these are hardly any type of violations. The only reason they're mad at him is because he lied to them about it. And so he already doesn't have a good reputation with them. He's for player revenue sharing, so they don't like that. And so I could see this being a situation where this new regime, who hasn't punished anybody yet for anything, says, dude, you got recruiting violations, you got all this stuff going on, we're going to come down on you hard. And I think most likely this will end up in Harbaugh not being at Michigan next year, because I think that he's probably going to find a job either with the Bears or whoever else that fires their coach this offseason. Maybe he goes and be special teams coordinator for John Harbaugh. I don't know. But, just something where he gets out of there because he doesn't want to deal with this anymore. And he realizes that, he's just not long for college football when he makes this many enemies in that way. So, we'll see what happens this year. I can't imagine the Big Ten would do anything. That would just seem like an admission of guilt from them. That like, oh yeah, they are, are one of our most prominent schools in college football all time, our most prominent of all time probably is cheating, and we're going to make an example of them. I don't see it happening. I think the biggest thing here is that they hired an analyst who probably grade-wise couldn't even have got into Michigan.
Yes.
The players are probably smarter than he is. Like, why you pay people back on Venmo, you're public on Venmo for all of these things to be seen. You're using your own name. Like, dude, buy a burner phone, right?
Please. Literally Google how to be a criminal.
Exactly. Like I feel like I could do this. And
criminals a little rough, but like,
right, but still secretive.
Yeah.
How to be secretive. You could just type that in. That would have probably helped. So, I think that if this was anybody else, it would probably be nothing. And the coordinator, one of the two coordinators, because of the stuff that Ohio State has been putting out, would probably be, probably be suspended maybe a game or two. But when you have evidence, like the news that just came out earlier today, when you have evidence that this dude bought tickets for 40 plus games this season alone, I mean, the dude bought 8 games for Ohio State. 8 games this season, including that Penn State game. Like, I mean, now obviously they didn't go to all of them because they have games in the future. Ohio State hasn't played 8 games yet, but still, like, he has bought all these games. He has a network of people that he has going to these games and recording the sideline. Like, I don't know if it's actually that big at other places, but it looks that big this way. And he was really, really stupid with how he did it.
The numbers do look super bad from when this guy was hired to when he wasn't hired. Like, that's probably the most damning evidence is there does seem to be an effect. Now, is that just causation? Because I mean, their team really did kind of flip a switch. Was it because of this? I don't know if you can be definite on that. What I want to hear is, I mean, you're from Columbus. Like, did they have the pitchforks out? Because like here in Indianapolis, I'll admit, like, no one's really talking about this. I got friends in Chicago. No one's really talking about this.
Yeah.
But like Columbus, I mean,
Dude,
I feel
Ohio
like
State
you
Twitter
guys
is
are ready to go.
Ohio State Twitter is unhinged right now on this stuff. Of course, I run the Big Ten Huddle account, which I haven't tweeted much about this on because, all I did was I tweeted out the video that one of the 10 TV, that's the news station over
Yeah.
in Columbus, put out. And of course, I had Michigan fans all in my mentions about how biased of a podcast this is. And, he hates Michigan and he's just one big Ohio State fan. I was like, well, at least I tell you who I'm a fan of. There's people out there who won't even tell you because they're babies. But it was like, calm down. If we're actually looking at this, if you're actually looking at this from an unbiased perspective, this isn't good. I never said that you're going to lose your coach and that you're going to be banned from the playoffs or anything like that. But, this isn't good. I will say that I do think because of Michigan's schedule being a little bit softer and because of all this stuff too, if more information just keeps coming out, if they lose to Ohio State, I don't see there being any way they make the playoffs. Even if they beat Penn State too, I don't see there being any way they make the playoffs because I think that there's just too much smoke around all this stuff. And
the NCAA doesn't want this to be news.
No, they don't.
And if they make, like, you're right. If they don't get an automatic bid, there is zero chance they are the team put in by the committee, because the NCAA does not want this. The NCAA acts like nobody knows they do awful things. Everybody knows, but they don't want to admit that everyone knows, and they want this buried as quick as possible.
Right. I've always said that the NCAA doesn't act until it's public. Like they're kind of like, do whatever you want, just don't let it be public, And then of course all this information comes out about Michigan, and it's like, they're looking at Michigan, they're like, really, guys, you could have got away with this. You just didn't have to be stupid.
Yep, exactly. The dumbest guy of all time.
Yeah. So, and I know some people have been talking about like the new clause or whatever, or new rule that like Jim Harbaugh, even if he doesn't know, he could still get punished because of the, like institutional control rule, I think is what it's called. I think that he'll get a minor punishment, but I think at the end of the day, Harbaugh's just done with this. I think he wants to go to the NFL. He showed that he can build a program in college, cheating or not, and NFL team is probably going to hire him at the very least as some kind of defensive coordinator or something like that. And he would see that as a better gig than, coaching in an area where the NCAA is never going to leave him alone.
Yeah, he just doesn't need it, right? I mean, I don't know if you'd want to admit this, but I mean, he's the most successful coach at Michigan since when? Since a long time. He's
Lloyd Carr, probably.
Yeah, he's brought Michigan back. Michigan's in a better place than when he got it there. He's accomplished big things. Like, I'm sure his goal is to win national championships, plural. Mm-hmm. But if he steps back and looks at what he's done, no one will say it isn't a success. So you're right. Like, being a college coach is way more difficult than being a head coach. Now the pay, it's about equal, if not maybe a little higher in college ranks. But
well, the thing with being a college coach is like, and we could go all day on like the differences between NFL and college, and I don't want to do that, but we can at least say this is like, when you're a college coach, you're basically worshipped.
Yes.
Like when you're in the NFL, it's like, oh, it's this dude's fault. This dude sucks. Why can't he call a play? Everybody hates him. The players hate him. The assistant coaches hate him. The fans hate him. Everybody. But when you're a college coach, like you could literally have the worst offense in the world, cough, cough, Iowa, and fans still love you. You could literally hire your son to run the worst offense ever, and fans still love you. Now, obviously not all of them. There are a good amount of Iowa fans that want Kirk Ferentz gone, but I think that stems more from wanting Brian Ferentz gone, and they think, well, if Brian Ferentz is gone, Kirk is probably going to go too. But people just have this affinity for college coaches differently than they do NFL coaches, especially the players. I mean, these players, even though they're making NIL money, it's not nearly what guys are making in the NFL. So they don't feel as entitled. They don't feel as much in charge or anything like that. And so even though players are getting paid, and there probably will be more that they get paid for, being a college coach, it's a lot nicer of a gig in terms of how much people like you rather than the NFL. Unless maybe you're Ohio State, then people hate you if you lose one game. But
standards are high.
Standards
are high.
All right, you got any more thoughts on that, Brandon?
No. You have a good question. Do I think Michigan will be better or worse? Man, I think that freight train is just going to keep rolling.
Yeah.
JJ looks stronger every week. That run game is what we thought they were. That defense is real. I don't think they're worse for it. I don't know how much better they can be, to be honest. So yeah. I certainly don't think they're going to be worse for it.
Yeah, I think they play with a bigger fire after this.
They got to prove it. They literally have bulletin board material now.
Right. They have a bigger fire, and they have the material that they need. I mean, if they were going to get fired up from the free Harbaugh, I can't imagine, how they're going to be fired up for all this stuff. Which, hey, again, if you love your coach, even if he, did something that everybody else deems as silly, the players love him and they're going to fight for him. So, yeah, I think this Michigan freight train is just going to keep rolling, and the only thing that could possibly stop them is Ohio State. And even as an Ohio State fan, okay, Michigan fans, don't tell me that I'm biased, okay? I think you're probably going to win again this year. I think you're probably going to win pretty big, and Ohio State's probably not going to make the playoffs. That's just the way I think. I could be wrong. Hopefully I am wrong. But, I mean, I don't think the knowing plays makes that big of a deal. And that's kind of why I'm surprised they got as deep into it as they did, because I really don't think it makes that big of a deal.
Well, as an Ohio State guy, do you want to know what my Big Ten prediction was for the Big Ten East?
Yeah.
Since we're here, I think every home team wins. I think it's a 3-way tie.
Oh.
I think
Penn State upsets Michigan in a couple weeks.
Man, they look so rough. I may backtrack that, but that was my prediction at the beginning of the year, that all three teams are tied and Ohio State wins that tiebreaker.
Yeah. It could happen. I'm not trying to say it won't happen or anything like that, but I will say that I
do think you guys lose to Michigan, though.
Yeah.
But you already did the hard thing, which was beat Penn State at home.
Right.
So I'm sure you guys are huge Nittany Lion fans now.
Right. I think Penn State's a different team at home than they are on the road. So I do think that it's harder for a new quarterback to go on the road than it is at home. So unfortunately, they won't have the whiteout. The whiteout's a great atmosphere, but still at noon when you're playing for your season, kind of like they are, and you have all the smoke about Harbaugh and how much he's beaten them lately and stuff like that, I think that team is going to be at least a little bit fired up.
Number one defense.
Yeah. Yep. And honestly, I know some people say Ohio State put up 20 on them. They still looked really good. The only difference was Ohio State had Marvin Harrison Jr. They couldn't cover him. I mean, that was the biggest difference in that one. But guess what? Michigan, I know Roman Wilson is a speedy guy and he's good. I'm not denying that at all. But he's not Marvin Harrison Jr.
There is no other Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah. So, all right. Hey, thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate everybody for watching. Do follow the Big Ten Huddle on Twitter. And do remember, we are brought to you by Big Banter Sports, bigbantersports.com. Find all of your college basketball and college football Big Ten media needs there. We'll see you next time on the Big Ten Huddle. See ya.